Hello, beautiful writing friends. I am hopping on here today to have a bit of a just like casual, chill, sit down conversation with you about like how my writing career is going and what I've been working on recently because I have spent the past couple of months working really hard on the sequel to the book that I published in October. And I thought that it would be interesting to kind of talk to you very candidly about how that's going and all the stuff that I've learned about writing sequels without making a formal, like, sit down video where I break everything down in a very succinct way. I have learned a lot about writing sequels from this book. It's been a really interesting book to write because I've encountered a lot of challenges that I didn't expect to encounter because I didn't really think that sequels would be that hard to write. And now I kind of understand why everybody says that writing the sequel is the hardest part to writing the series. So, yeah, I have a couple of things on a list. I made a list on my phone with all of the things that I'm going to share with you about this sequel writing process, and I guess we can get started. If this is your first video that you're ever finding on my channel, first of all, that's hilarious because this is not the kind of video I usually make, but if it is, welcome. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm an award-winning young adult author who makes videos on this channel sharing the actionable writing advice that helped me make my writing better. I try to break all of the stuff that I learned down into its most actionable, step-by-step pieces to really show you how I implemented that tip to actually, improve my writing. But that's not what we're doing today. Today we're just doing kind of like a writing update sort of thing where you will learn stuff about sequels. So by the end of this video, you will have learned some tips for writing sequels, but it's not going to be presented as like a, step 1, step 2, step 3, and, counting to 10 over the whole course of the video. But, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff. And let's get started. So back in October, I published a book called They Stay, which is a young adult supernatural thriller about ghosts. It's sort of like for fans of Stranger Things-esque. It follows a girl whose little brother goes missing, and as she is looking for him and sets out to find him, a girl who is her classmate, who she thinks and everybody in their town thinks is kind of weird because she claims that she can see ghosts, but everybody knows the ghosts aren't real, tells her that this girl knows where Shiloh's little brother is, and that a ghost told her where Shiloh's little brother is. So Shiloh has to decide whether she's going to believe her classmate and believe that ghosts are real and go on this supernatural adventure, or if she's just going to call her classmate crazy. And, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but the plot for why the little brother went missing ends up being this creepy, supernatural thing where ghosts are involved. They Whisper, the sequel to They Stay, is going to come out on April 12th, 2022. And that is not that far away from right now. This is the fastest that I've ever written and published a book ever, and it has been a bit of a challenge to keep up with this publishing schedule. I have learned that I need a little bit of time in order to feel good about the work that I'm producing. I feel like if I'm writing too fast and forcing myself to move too fast, that I don't feel good about what I'm producing for whatever reason. I'm not really sure. Even if it's good work, I don't have time to process it and absorb it and critically analyze it. So it just makes me feel like I'm not in control of what I'm creating. I think I need to be moving at a slightly slower pace, or at least give myself more time to take breaks in between different bouts of drafting in order to keep the pace, because I know 6 months is not that fast for self-publishing. I need to be at 6 months or faster. I might try to experiment with staggering projects so that I'm able to kind of, once I'm in the second to third phase, drafting phase for one book, I can be in the first draft phase for another project, and that way I can keep my brain balanced so I can be doing creative stuff while doing the drafting stuff. I'll have to work on that because I think that might be a strategy that helps, but it is definitely a very, very fast publishing turnaround, and it has been a little bit stressful to try to balance it all while writing a sequel for the very first time, and while also going through a bit of a love-hate cycle with books. I think it's really normal to go through a love-hate cycle with books. There are going to be periods where you love your book, and there are going to be periods where you hate your book. While I was writing the first draft of this book, I remember being about halfway through and telling my family that I felt so good about this book. I didn't think it was going to need that much editing. Everything just like made sense. It was so exciting. It was so good. And then I read it after I'd finished it, because I didn't even finish the climax. I wrote like all the way up until the climax, and I went back and I started from scratch to re-outline and re-edit to make the climax make sense. And I was reading it and I was like, this is not as good as I thought it was going to be. So I went through a bit of a hate cycle, and then I loved it again, kind of back when I was like reaching the point, like the midway point of that second draft again. And then I hated it because I had just rushed to get it done before my deadline. And then I hated it while other people were reading it. And now that I have feedback from my editor back, I love it again. This happens a lot. This happens whenever I feel pressure and stress. Whenever I don't feel any pressure or stress wrapped up in a writing project, I don't hate it. I love it because it only exists to me. And thankfully, they stay. I just love that book so much. Now that it's been published, like, I don't have any kind of hateful feelings toward it, because I'm done stressing and worrying about it, and now I can just sit here and be proud of it. I always knew that I wanted this book to be a series. Even when I first started writing the first book, like, I knew I didn't want to just have it be a standalone. It had a lot of potential to just be a standalone, but I felt strongly that I wanted to self-publish it, and I wanted to be able to write a series because I had never written a series before, and I had this idea for how I could turn this kind of idea for a standalone into a series. So instead of the book ending when the younger brother is either found or not found, there is more to the story than just the missing brother plot. So I kind of had an idea for the general direction I could take the series, but I didn't have a very clear outline for book 2 even after I wrote book 1. I wrote the ending for book 1. I had everything in book 1 squared away. I published book 1, and then I sat down to like write the sequel. And, you know, after people had already been reading it and reviewing it and stuff, and that kind of the ending of book 1 couldn't really be changed, I sat down to write the sequel and realized that I didn't necessarily write myself into a hole, but it would have been strategic to have figured out what I wanted to have happen in book 2 before publishing book 1. And like the general direction I knew I wanted to take book 2 required a lot of world building that I didn't necessarily do in book 1. I'll say right now that book 2 right now, right at this moment, right on this day, is going really well, and I'm actually feeling really good about it. But for the like 3 weeks leading up to today, I was feeling really, really bad about it. And like I had no idea what I was doing. Like, you know, this book might just be a giant dumpster fire of a project. And, you know, it was so complicated. There were so many different moving parts in my head that I was having a lot of trouble separating what was true and what needed to happen versus what didn't work in the world that I created, because everything was so complicated. And like, I don't know, like there was so much, and still like I have to tackle one subplot every day. Otherwise I get too overwhelmed because I'm trying to do so many different things. But now, like, I've gotten my edit letter back from my editor, and she said that it's not in as bad of shape that I thought it was, and that there are a lot of good things. And then she helped clarify, like, what things need to be clarified and what needs to be worked on. So now I have, like, a big plan in place, and I'm feeling a lot better about my outline. But I was also, like, in the process of drafting book 2 while book 1 was being reviewed and released. And the pressure from like reading other people's reviews and thoughts, like even if they absolutely love your book, it creates a lot of pressure as you're writing the second one, because everyone is like, I can't wait for book 2. I'm so excited for book 2. And I feel like or at least I felt like very worried that book 2 was not going to live up to the hype. I have never written a book for real people before. Like, obviously I have it in an abstract sense, but now, like, I have people's actual names and faces in my head, like people on my ARC team who are excited for book 2. And it's very weird to, like, try to stay in this creative space in your head while you can like hear other people's voices also in your head who like have things that they love, things that they didn't love, and you're trying to balance what you want for the book and what your readers want for the book. And I'm so excited that everybody is so excited for book 2, and now I am excited for book 2 as well. Like, all of the stuff that just felt muddy, like, now feels a lot clearer. So now for draft 3, I'm gonna be able to like get rid of all the stuff that I didn't like and all the stuff that was giving me that like bad feeling, and just pack it with stuff that I do like, because now it has a very clear like cause and effect trajectory and structure over the entire book. Like there were a couple of things where I was like, oh, that makes no sense and that's way too zany and that doesn't make any sense because this character is doing this, but they think he's doing that, but then this, like it was all just super convoluted. Now it's not. So I think that that's going to really help too. But it's definitely hard to give yourself the space to be creative when you're hearing other people's voices and expectations a lot. But getting so much feedback on book one has also been really helpful for shaping book two, because I'm able to sort of look for commonalities between people's reviews or critiques and pick out some things that I see a lot and make sure that I incorporate that in the sequel. So one thing that I'm doing in the sequel, it was pretty universal, a lot, like among a lot of different reviews, that people wanted more of one particular character. And so I took that and I have put that character's point of view in, I think, like quadrupled how much screen time he gets from his point of view in book two compared to book one. So one of the first things that this process has made me realize about sequels was that sequels need to be a separate adventure from book one. Originally, like book one ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. Like the main plot is wrapped up, but there's another like smaller cliffhanger at the end. And then book two originally picked up like right in that same scene, exactly where book one left off, and kind of continued the plot of book one. The problem with that, and what I realized about that, is that it didn't have a very clear like point of entry, inciting incident, midpoint, climax, resolution. It just kind of continued book one in sort of a muddy way. Like there were things that I wanted to have happen in book two, but the world building was a little bit sloppy. Like I didn't really know what it, or like how it was gonna work. And I didn't like the fact that it was muddy and that there weren't like clear inciting incidents and clear plot points I could use to do things like write the marketing text and the blurb. Even though your second book continues your story, your second book has to be readable by someone who didn't read book one. And this isn't something that I planned for when I was writing book one. I just wanted to create sort of like a bingeable series where you didn't have to remind readers what happened in book one. But I found that just by dropping people into the middle of the action, in the middle of the scene that book one ended off of, it made everyone so confused, because realistically it's going to have been some time since a lot of people have read the first book. So you need to remind them of what happened and set them up for a new adventure instead of just continuing off the old adventure. I also realized that this book has slightly different vibes from the first one. And I think different books in different series have different vibes, and that's okay. But I wasn't anticipating this. I thought that all of the books in the series were going to have similar vibes, but this is not the case. Book one was more of like a true crimey murder mystery with like light supernatural elements. This book goes a lot heavier into the supernatural elements, and there are a lot more ghosts and stuff in this book. Some of the characters go off the deep end, some of the character relationships change, and the dynamics change compared to book one, and there are some elements that get a lot more violent than they were in book one. So that is different than I was expecting. Also, because your characters need to grow and change over the course of the story, your characters can also change in between book one and book two. The role that one character played in book one may be different that they'll play in book two. Like Shiloh in book one was very, very focused on finding Max, and that was all that she could think about throughout the entire book. But in book two, that same concern was wrapped up in book one, so that isn't hanging over her head the entire book. So she's able to explore different parts of her personality and humanity and values and what matters to her within the prism of this new plot, which makes her feel a little bit different than the Shiloh in book one. I mean, they're still like the same character, and they still have the same values and the same loved ones, and they still act the same way, but because they do slightly different things and they grow and evolve a little bit, I don't know, she feels a little different. Something else I learned about sequel writing was that not everything has to happen in book two. Like, I went a little bit crazy with brainstorming stuff. I got so excited about packing all of these ideas that I had for book two into book two that I kind of went a little overboard, and my first draft for book two looked like it would be close to 140,000 words, and then I had to do a little bit of critical evaluation and tell myself that that didn't make very much sense, and that I think I had a little bit too much going on in this book. 5-ish subplots is manageable, but like 10 plus subplots plus the main plot was just too much for one singular book. This is going to be a long-ish series. Like, I'm going to have more books to be able to incorporate these things. So I didn't need to like race to put everything in the book. But yeah, I don't know. I got a little bit carried away, and I think that made me confused, which is why I got super overwhelmed. Another thing I wrote down on this handy dandy list that I created for this video was that in book 2, just, by the nature of writing a sequel, you need to have conflict. If you're writing a second book, you can't have a book without conflict. And so the conflict can't be over for your characters. Even if you had a happy ending in book 1, that happy ending might not be permanent. And, there are still going to be terrible things that your characters are going to have to go through in book 2. Also, if you're writing a long series, not everything has to be solved in book 2. Like, if you're going to have multiple books, you can incorporate new stuff in book 2 that isn't tied up in a neat bow at the end of book 2. Things can get a lot worse before they get better, which is not something that I had experimented with writing before. I always try to create neat arcs at the end of book 1. I mean, as I said before, this is my first time writing a sequel, so this whole thing has been a bit of an experiment. Another big thing that I learned is that there's no way that you can please every reader who liked book 1. You are gonna have to make decisions when you're writing a sequel, and it's, your choice where you take your characters, what you want their arcs to be, who you want them to get together with, and what feels right for them as you know them. You're gonna have readers who want your characters to get together with all sorts of weird pairings that you didn't originally envision. You cannot have them get together with every single character in the book like your readers want to, if it doesn't feel authentic for that character. If they want to, go them, but there are some characters that it doesn't work for. And at the end of the day, it's your book, and it's your characters, and it's your universe and your authorial voice that made that reader connect with your book in the first place. So if it feels right to you, and you read a positive review and they have a suggestion that really resonates with you, maybe you can run with that, but don't let all of the reviews and suggestions that you hear influence how you write your book to a large extent. And don't let it frazzle you either. If you have a lot of different people with different opinions, that is a good thing, because people connected with your book and with your characters enough to have all of these different fan opinions about it. It was honestly hilarious reading some of the reviews for They Stay and seeing in one review someone was like, "Oh my god, I hated Shiloh. She was the most annoying main character ever, but I loved Miles." And then in the next review it would be like, "Oh my god, Miles was so annoying. All he did was whine the whole time, and Shiloh was so strong. I just wanted to give her a hug." It really people have different opinions of your characters, and that's a good thing. If people have different opinions about your characters, that means that you did a good job fleshing out your characters and you made them three-dimensional people. There are no people that are universally loved by every single person out there. People are complicated, and they are multifaceted, and they don't always act in a perfect way, and they're gonna cause different reactions based on different readers. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say. I just kind of wanted to show you through this video that the writing process is messy, and just because, you think that you have a strong writing process, things can change, things can challenge you, but I'm in a really good place with this book now, and I'm really, really happy and excited about it. Whereas last week, if you'd asked me, I would have cried probably about how overwhelmed I was about this project. So keep writing, keep learning, keep experimenting with stuff, and don't give up on books, especially if you're in a love-hate cycle with them and you're in a bit of a hating phase. Writing is hard, and things get better. I'm so excited to publish this book now. I'm almost done with my outline for draft 3. I keep doing it in sort of bite-sized chunks. I got my edit letter back yesterday, and so I've just been going through the outline again, and I'm gonna try to make my outline updated and incorporating all the things that I want to add and change and delete, so that when I go and approach draft 3, I'm gonna be able to just go through my outline and make my draft adhere to my outline, and then I can go back and rework it for a 4th time. But I'm not trying to do that all at once. I'm just taking it one day at a time, and I'm gonna try to incorporate as much stuff as I can every day without doing too much that I get overwhelmed. So I'm gonna pace myself, because I find that when I pace myself, I create the best work and I feel the best about my work. But yeah, if you're interested in reading the sequel, it's gonna come out in April. I don't have it up for pre-order yet, but if you join my mailing list, you will get all of my updates about the sequel. And that link is in the description. Or if you want to go read my first book, They Stay, I have all of the links in the Amazon description. It's up for $2.99 on the ebook store and is also free in Kindle Unlimited. I have so many bloopers like that whenever I film my usual YouTube videos. But because, this is a casual video today, I'm just not gonna edit any of them out, so you are graced with all of my bloopers. Yeah, it's actually a problem. It takes me so long to record my YouTube videos because I stutter over my words, or I'll start a sentence and I don't know where it's going and I'll just kind of like let it taper off. So yeah, it's a struggle. But anyway, like and subscribe if you want to. Happy writing, everybody. Bye!